Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing okay. Cave Geek is here. Claims to be first. Tuna said he was lurking prior to Cave showing up. Snowlock says that everybody is cheating. Evo, strong fourth. What's up, Matt? How's it going? How's everybody? How are your worlds? It's been an odd week. We were supposed to go back to class on Tuesday. We had a not a snow day, but a ice day. So we ended up going back yesterday. But that means that I lost a day of class in my Tuesday, Thursday classes. So today I had to try to play catch up. And I was unsuccessful in both classes to catching them up. There's just too much stuff to try to cram 3 hours of material in an hour and 20 minutes. It's just not going to work. So, your world is better than medieval Europe. I would suspect so. The fact that we have electricity, we're all sitting inside. We've all theoretically eaten in the last 24 hours. If we really need to, we could go to a doctor. I think that we've got a lot of stuff on our side. Not dying from the plague, right? We're not actually quite to the plague yet. That's actually a little bit more Renaissance Europe, so we might talk about that next time around. But yeah, we've had a viewer request stream on the plague, so that was pretty fun. Yeah, and we don't have leeches all over us, so that's also a very positive thing. I'm not a fan of leeches. They kind of freak me out just by the they're like just sacks with teeth. It's weird. I don't dig it. Anyway, not my thing. But welcome. So here we are. Tomorrow's Friday. I'm glad that tomorrow's Friday. I finished my antibiotics from the horrible sinus infection that I had today. So hopefully my stomach will return to normal. And now that I don't have to take all of the medicine, maybe I will get a bit more energy. I have been exceedingly tired because of all of the medication. It just doesn't sit well with me. Hi, from my lovely wife. So yeah, that's what's up. It's been sort of a weird day in the world, but we could talk about that later on. The goal of the night is to talk about Europe. And normally when we talk about Europe, we talk about the medieval period. You always get the lecture on like feudalism and the manorial system and how all of the things are broken down and all of that stuff. And we might still have that discussion. I don't know. We're currently being visited by a puppy. Anybody want to see a puppy? There's a puppy. It's like a little puppy butt. Hey, where are you going? Hey, where are you going? I just turned on the puppy cam. Or we're just not going to get a puppy. She got camera shy. I apologize. You try to give her what she wants, and then she just runs away. Oh well. Bring out your dad. Yeah. We might talk about feudalism. I don't know how much interest you all have going through the whole concept of how feudalism is built and why it was built the way that it was. I could do that. We could talk about that if everybody's interested. But I think that's one of the few things that gets pretty thoroughly covered in most of our curricula for, European history. So what I wanted to do is look at a little bit more of the stuff that's going on kind of behind the scenes. Like, yeah, sure, everything's moving towards feudalism, but what are some of the big things that are going on in the background of that, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff that's kind of scattered, a little bit weird, things that aren't really on the typical discussion, but that's, again, kind of what we do here. So we're going to start with sort of a theme of what's going on between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And there were legitimate distinctions in ideology during this time. But before we launch totally into that, let's take a look at where our countries are and sort of get a lay of the land. And obviously here we have a very different looking map than the one that we are used to looking at. We don't see a lot of the same countries that we're used to, or some of the countries that we're used to seeing don't have the same borders that they do today. Obviously, the world has shifted substantially. What might be most interesting is that we have Denmark and England, and these two countries are fairly close to being about the same borders here in the year 1000 as they are today. Everything else is way different. This is basically France, but it's not all of France. There's, a whole other chunk here. And here we have what might be called Germany, but it's the Roman Empire, right? Or the Holy Roman Empire, to call it what you want. But anyway, so there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of different countries. Italy here, of course, looks like a mess. There's a lot of stuff going on down here in Italy. The Roman Empire, of course, is here called the Roman Empire, but might be better referred to as the Byzantine Empire. We've got the development of the Rus here along the Volga and stuff like that. So, we've got some cool stuff going on. But let us start with religious debate. And I'm sure that everybody is super interested in this stuff. But we're not going to go super far into it. We're going to get some of the discussion, some of the argument. We're not going to get into the deep theological rigmarole of what they're actually arguing about. For a little while, I had seriously considered doing an entire stream just on the Great Schism, and then I realized nobody cares about that. Because we would be here debating really fine points of Christian theology, and nobody wants to do that. Or the people that want to do that are probably people that already know a lot about it, or would be just as well served sending me a message on Discord and saying, hey, could you explain that? All right. So one of the things that we have to talk about just religiously is a growing rift between Western Europe and Eastern Europe when it comes to religion. And this is going to come down to a pretty big, important concept called papal primacy. So there were 5 centers of church leadership in the ancient world that were Christian patriarchates. These are cities where we have a patriarch. This is Rome. This is Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. Now, at the time that we're discussing things, only 2 of those were in the hands of Christians. Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem had been conquered by Islam and had been held by Islamic forces at this point for about 400 years. So we're really looking here at Constantinople versus Rome. And there is a really big debate here. It gets deep into scriptural interpretation, but basically the church in Rome claims that they have the right to be the prime patriarch city. So the Pope, or the Bishop of Rome, has what's called papal primacy. What's up, KP? Now, that's not held universally. Some of the other Christians in the larger Christian church did not agree that the Pope was the head of all of the Christian church. What they thought was, okay, well, maybe if we're going to give them something, we can say that the Bishop of Rome is like the first among equals. Like, we're all on the same level. They're not special. But, of course, that doesn't sit well with the Romans. And to add to this, there's a lot of really weird arguments going on. Papal primacy is in the background of all of this, but one of the big arguments is an argument over this phrase, filioque. And you're like, that sounds horrible. I don't want to know anything about that. We're not going to go deep into it, but basically it means and through the Son. And the Western Christian Church, run by the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, had added this to the Nicene Creed. So the Nicene Creed was sort of like the official statement of Christian faith that had been made by all of the Christian leadership in the 320s. And that was sort of like, you don't mess with this. So they're trying to describe the Holy Spirit, and they also say that the Holy Spirit comes by the Father and through the Son. So they're trying to insert filioque into the Nicene Creed. This does not go over very well. The people in the East are not pleased and do not accept this, and this is already causing a lot of argument. We're not going to get into the theology. We're not going to get into the Trinitarian ideology. We're just going to say they're arguing about prepositions, and prepositions get people in trouble. Another of the big arguments is about bread. And you're like, okay, this sounds stupid. They're arguing about bread. Yes. And they are arguing really strongly about bread. Because here's the argument. When you do communion, this is the act of eating the body and drinking the blood, right? Let me eat cake because I like cake. If Noger wants to have bread, let him eat bread, right? But the argument here is, should our bread have yeast in it? What's up, Danaus? And Lumpy, how's it going? When we do communion, should our bread be leavened? Should it be like a cracker or a wafer? Or should it be bread? And there is a really, really big argument about this. And it gets real nasty. And both sides have decent arguments. One side says, okay, well, look, when they did the Last Supper, which is where Jesus met with the disciples and said the whole Lord's Supper thing, they were celebrating Passover. And Passover, they would not have been eating leavened bread. Because if they had been eating leavened bread, they wouldn't have been following Passover the right way, because Passover requires unleavened bread. Because you weren't going to sit around and wait for the bread to rise. You were going to be ready to go, so that you could get out the door after the death angel killed all the Egyptians and Moses is going to lead you out, right? Now, the other side, in the East, they said, but Jesus is the bread of life. And yeast is life. And the bread rises like Jesus rises. And Jesus rose out of the tomb. So our bread should be representative of Jesus. So when we are actively consuming the body, we should be consuming the body as it is represented by the risen Christ. And I know that a lot of people that think this is petty don't really get how big of a deal this is. But let me tell you, it's a huge deal. It's a really, really, really big deal. This is where we get our title for the night, Azymite 451. Azymite is the title that the Eastern Church starts giving to the Western Church. Azymos is the Greek word for unleavened bread. So asmos or azymite, a person who eats unleavened bread, right? So, you know, they start calling them this as a pejorative to insult them. Schism over a pun. Yeah, I mean, hey, that's where we're headed. Let me catch up with chat. Welp, okay. I'm still employed at least. There was a surprise round of layoffs. Holy moly, that sounds crazy, Lumpy. That's no good. Sounds like Europe as always. Kinda. Theological bacterial interaction. So yeast are technically fungus, not bacteria. Different kingdom. I learned that because my wife taught me. There's an odd game of musical chairs above me, and now you have a new boss. Ooh. That's no fun either. Yeah, exactly what Noger said. I'll go with yeast people. Yeasty bread has more flesh to it. Right? It's more fleshy? I don't know. It's a big deal. So we're arguing about a preposition, and we're arguing about bread. And in the background of this is the Pope in Rome going, I get to make the decisions. And on the other side, the Patriarch of Constantinople going, no, you don't. No. And this brings us to our big debate here. And these two guys are going to be the ones that sort of kick off the last round of the fight. And we've got two guys here. Over here, we have the Pope, and this is Pope Leo the Ninth. And over here, we have Michael the First, who is Patriarch of Constantinople. Now, Michael sort of starts off the angry part because he decides that he's going to send a letter to the Pope, and in the letter, he's going to sneak in some disses, just some minor disses. For example, he does not address the Pope as father. He addresses him as brother. This is a subtle dig. You're not above me. We're on the same level. And that by itself ticks off the Pope, and the Pope gets really mad at the tone of the letter. What century are these? This is happening in the 1050s. So this is the 11th century. So the Pope decides it's time to get rid of Michael. So the Pope gets a group of church leaders, including a cardinal, so this is like top-level church leadership, and he writes a letter of excommunication, and he gives it to this cardinal, and he says, okay, your job is to go over to Constantinople and excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople. And the cardinal is like, can I get some backup? So they get 4 or 5 people that are all high-ranking church officials to sort of go deliver this letter, right? So when they get to Constantinople, Michael kind of figures out what's going on, right? One does not simply excommunicate the Archbishop of Constantinople. No, it's not like, you just sort of like walk up and, say, hi, you're excommunicated. They ask for an audience with Michael, and he's like, I smell fish. There's something up here. No, I am not going to meet with you. And so he sort of puts them in a holding tank. This is before the Battle of Manzikert, yes. Battle of Manzikert is in 1071. This is in 1054. So they've got their little enclave of bishops and a cardinal hanging out in Constantinople, but they can't get to the guy to deliver the letter of excommunication. And what's weird here is that people start figuring out that they're around. And so they start going to these people to talk, because a cardinal is a pretty high-ranking member of, the Catholic Church. So a lot of people start going to these people to do confessions or to do mass. And this makes Michael really, really upset. He's like, no, you're not supposed to be doing stuff in my city. This is my city, and I know why you're here. And so he starts trying to put the squeeze on him to get him to leave. And then in the middle of all of this, Leo the Ninth actually dies. He's dead. So the authority that the cardinal and his enclave had died with Leo. So now they're like behind enemy lines, and they're not even really sure if the letter that they're carrying actually counts anymore, because it wasn't delivered while Leo was alive. And they don't really want to cause too much trouble because now their cover is blown and the new pope doesn't even really know what's going on yet. This guy's name is Sylvester. He doesn't know what's up with these people or why they're over in Constantinople, so they don't know if they've got, authority or not. So they decide to do something kind of sketchy, and they wait until there is a public mass at Hagia Sophia. And I get to put on the adventure hat. I get to wear the adventure hat several times tonight. Pretty fun times. We will do some adventure hat emotes. I shall put the adventure hat on. I don't think I've ever shared this photo of Hagia Sophia before. What's up, Kyle? This is Hagia Sophia. Now, this is Hagia Sophia at sundown. There's a big square out in front of it, as you can see. It's got this really cool fountain here. The fountain changes colors and has a whole bunch of LED stuff, or I guess light stuff in it. But anyway, this is Hagia Sophia. At the time, it was the largest enclosed building on Earth, and it was the personal church of the Patriarch of Constantinople, the largest church on Earth. You've been there. Cool, Noger. I did not know that. Did you enjoy your time in Istanbul? It's a beautiful city. It's also a beautiful building, right? Very, very pretty. It is a mosque now. It is a mosque. So they wait until there's a public mass that's being overseen by Michael. And they sort of stand in line because Michael's giving communion. And they get up to the front of the line where they're supposed to receive communion, and they put the excommunication letter on the altar. So Michael, the Patriarch of Constantinople, is literally doing a church service, and in the middle of the church service, he gets excommunicated. But does he get excommunicated? Because the letter was signed by Leo, and Leo's dead now, and it's delivered after the fact. Anyway, it gets Michael real mad. And he sort of storms out, as one might, and immediately draws up letters of excommunication for the cardinal and all of the people with him, and publicly excommunicates them pretty much on the spot. And so then they get sent back, and the new pope is like, what happened? So they have to explain everything that happened here, and then Michael is just like apoplectic. He has hit the ceiling. And so there's an attempt by the new pope. Yes, Istanbul was Constantinople. There's an attempt by the new pope to try to maybe smooth things over, but they're not having any of it. And what's interesting here is nobody really knows what's going on when it comes to the finer theological points here. Because if Michael was excommunicated, his excommunications of Cardinal Humbert and all of the other people, or Hubert, sorry, Humbert, Hubert, it was one of the two of them, doesn't count because he was already excommunicated, so therefore he didn't have the ability to excommunicate. But Michael's excommunication was ex post facto, and Leo was dead, so we don't know if we don't actually know who's excommunicated right now. And this causes a whole bunch of trouble because the way that a lot of this Catholic stuff works is if you are excommunicated or kicked out of the church or somehow questioned, pretty much everybody that you're over then has to sort of be like reconsecrated, because that calls into question whether or not these people are legitimately in. And this is just a big ball of fur. But this is what we call in history the Great Schism. And this is in 1054. But what happens as a result of this is the creation of two different Christian churches. And this is where you really start getting lasting division. Prior to that, theoretically speaking, all Christians on the face of the earth were part of the same church. They were all part of the Catholic with a small c church. Catholic there meaning universal. It's an excommunicunundrum. That's a long word. It's kind of crazy that my brain actually worked that one out. So now we have two different locales, and this had already been an issue as Christianity had expanded because new countries were being added and they had to be sort of attached to a structure. And were they going to answer to one of the churches in the East, or were they going to answer to Rome? And that had already been an argument, and that they had already had a substantial amount of push back and forth for that. For example, like Bulgaria. Bulgaria got what's called an autocephalous church, which means that they got to choose the head of their church, and they had a little bit of autonomy at the church head. Now, they were still attached to the larger structure, and for a little while, when they first got established in Bulgaria as the Bulgarian church, they were attached to Constantinople. But then a little bit later, they flopped over and were attached to Rome. And then they flopped back over and were attached to Constantinople. And now when you actually have a difference of opinion where we're going to start getting significant theological differences between the two, it's going to become more interesting about who these churches are going to pick, right? And you end up with situations where you have some countries that can't make their mind up. Like the Caucasian Albanian church. This is the one that's over in this region over here, right? They had chunks of their country that were aligned with Rome, and they had chunks of their country that were aligned with Constantinople. And that made administration of the religion just kind of crazy. The Armenian church just decided, forget all of you, we're just making our own church. And so they just sort of made their own church. So now we have the Armenian church, the Eastern Orthodox church, and the Roman Catholic church. And you can start seeing already that this is going to be like just causing trouble. I thought the Great Schism was between the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels. That's fair. I don't think there's much of an argument to be had there because eventually everybody gangs up and hates the new season or new series. So there you go. What up, Cave? Give me an S. Give me an H. Yeah, what's up, SpongeBob? How's it going, my friend? Syphilis would be avoided. Perhaps. What's up, Mountain Dragon? I once had a kind of your own schism in Turkey once. You had a date in Constantinople, but she was waiting in Istanbul. Alas. I hope you were able to find your way there. What's up, man? I tried really hard to get a pun for schism, but nothing rhymes with schism. There's a joke there, and I know the pieces fit. I just couldn't figure out how to make them fit. I just kind of watched them fall away. So there's your schism joke. Anyway, the religious side of things causes trouble because people in the European world were super religious. This was a big deal, a really big deal. And so everybody kind of has to pick. And everybody starts picking. So this is what we end up looking like. We have the Eastern Orthodox Church that is going to get basically everything on the east side of that line, and the Roman Catholic Church that's going to pretty much get everything that's to the other side of that line. Right? Now, this doesn't stay that way, obviously, because Armenia is about to go away, and now Egypt, in like the modern world, is Spartacus. What's up, Nick Slottle? I'm Spartacus. Nick Slottle, thank you so much for that subscription. You all can see the artist badge beside Nick Slottle, who designed the most amazing puppy head pat emote. And you should go give Nick Slottle a follow for all of your art streaming and 2.5D animated VTuber creation desires. Nix is a fun streamer, and you should go hang out. Hope you're doing well, Nixa. Thank you again for the subscription. 25 months is a really long time. It's starting to feel weird that people have been subscribed for that long. And I know that we have people that are like 38 months or something like that, or 35 months or something like that. We're rolling up on 4 years of streaming, and it blows my mind that I'm still at it. Mostly because I figured I would have burned out at this point, but I actually really like this stuff. So there we go. Crazier things have happened. Now, the religious stuff is a big deal. And after the church splits, this starts creating a lot of trouble because nobody wants to run afoul of the church. And this has a lot of political implication as well, because let's remember, the politics can make or break a king. If the Pope says you're not king, you're not king. If you're a Christian nation in the West, like say you're, trying to be the king of West Francia and you don't have the recognition of the Pope, you're not king. It just doesn't work. You're not going to get it. Same sort of thing goes with the East. If you don't have the support of the Eastern Patriarch in Constantinople, you're probably not going to be considered legitimate. So the religious split rolls over into things like politics. And that creates a lot of issue because you have a growing number of countries inside of Europe that are starting to move around a little bit more, right? One of the things that we're going to see happen during what we would call the high medieval age is a little bit more interconnectivity. Countries are going to become a little bit more stable internally, and what that means is they're going to start looking more externally, and they're going to start building a little bit more trade. They're going to start building a little bit more alliance. But if I'm a country that follows the Pope in Rome, can I even make a treaty with a country that follows the Patriarch in Constantinople? Or am I supposed to stay away from them completely because they're not legitimate Christians? And vice versa. So you can see how this schism thing here starts complicating a lot of issues. And unfortunately, the wedge that gets driven between the East and the West is going to result in a lot of mistrust and a lot of stuff that is going to exacerbate problems. Problems like military conquest in the East. So we talked about this a little bit last Thursday as the Seljuk Empire is expanding. We run into situations where the Eastern European Christian countries are going to come into contact more with powerful Muslim forces, and we're going to get people like this guy. This is Alexios I. He is part of the Komnenos dynasty, the Komnenoi. Alexios I was in a rough spot. He is emperor of the Byzantines after the Battle of Manzikert, where they lost a really big chunk of territory. Pretty much all of what we would call today Turkey, what they would call Anatolia, had fallen to the Seljuks. And this had cut off a lot of trade, a lot of food, a lot of, even access to things like sites in the Holy Land. And in the 1090s, Alexios is going to be faced with a really a tough decision. So by the 1090s, we're about 50 years or 40 so years past the schism. Things have set in. Everybody knows we're not really friends anymore. But his country is being overrun by Muslim invaders, and his only option that he sees as a viable course of action is to reach out to the West. And what's really interesting here is, had this sort of stuff happened 100 years prior, before the schism, there probably wouldn't have been much of the sort of cloak and dagger expectation, because when this, by the way, is his ask for help, and this is where we get the first crusade from. The crusade was a response to Alexios going, hey, we need some help. And Western Europe, the Pope at the time, said, hey, we can send over a big old army. But what's weird here is when they show up to Constantinople to help, Alexios does not meet these people with open arms. He actually is really, really skeptical of them. And he's super suspicious, and he doesn't actually want to let them across into the Asian part of the world, of the Byzantine Empire, until they swore a ton of oaths that they were going to honor Christianity, here kind of underlining like their version of Christianity. They weren't going to target Christians, because that had become a bit of an issue. If you're not following Rome, is it okay to kill you because you're not really a Christian, according to my version of Christian, right? So they couldn't target Christians. They had to follow very specific pathways, and they were expected to return all of their land, because one of the things that Alexios was sort of afraid of was, man, all of these Western people are going to come over here and they're going to steal all of this land from me. Do you think the Seljuks took advantage of these religious conflicts in Europe when they conquered Anatolia? I don't think that the Seljuks were particularly aware of a lot of this stuff. I would make an educated guess. I don't know the answer to this. Let me be very upfront. I don't know. I don't think that we have any documentation from the Muslim side that would have betrayed a knowledge of internal church politics like this. There might be something, but if it is, it's implied, or maybe, just a small reference that doesn't get a lot of attention, because I've read all of the Muslim sources, all of the Muslim primary sources from this particular time period that discuss this, and I've never seen anything that would sort of imply that they knew that there had been a theological church split. Now, if you're asking whether or not they knew whether Rome and Constantinople were getting along, they could probably tell you that Rome and Constantinople weren't getting along. But if you said, hey, do you know why? They might not be able to go into detail about, oh, well, there was a really complicated theological dispute and one side of the Christian church excommunicated the other side of the church. I don't think that they would know the theological implication behind it. But I also don't think that was necessarily a motivating factor for the Seljuks. The larger motivating factor for them was take as much land as possible so that we can turn and beat the crap out of the Fatimids in Egypt. And getting that land in Anatolia was a huge springboard for them, because it delivered to them a large amount of food productive area and a strategic location where they could winter their horses, because if we are about to attack down here into Egypt, you want somewhere as close to Egypt as possible to winter. And when you've got thousands and thousands of horses, the Syrian desert right here is not the best place to be. And if you moved an army down into, say, Antioch or maybe Aleppo, you would have exhausted the food supply in that region in just a couple of weeks with an army as big as the one that they had. So taking this area offered them a nice sort of platform or a springboard to rush down into the Levant and start fighting against the Fatimids here in Egypt. And they were ultimately successful in taking out the Fatimids. I don't think that they were actively trying to take advantage of that. I think that they may have benefited from that in sort of an indirect way, if that makes any sense. That's a great question, though. That's a great question. Now, if you wanted to know whether or not any Muslim understood that, I would bet that there were people in the Abbasid Caliphate court in Baghdad that would have been able to tell you exactly why Rome and Constantinople were fighting. There were people in the Muslim world, especially in the big centers of learning, like Baghdad, that deeply understood Christian theology and that kept very close tabs on what all of the major politics of the region were doing. So there would have been some people, but the Abbasids didn't have the best relationship with the Seljuks, so I doubt that the Abbasid court was readily supplying detailed information packets to sort of explain what's going on. What's up, Uncle Bill? I know that was a very convoluted answer, but you all know how I get. I take a good question in stride, and I try to give perhaps more information than what's needed. So, short answer, no. Long answer, everything that I just said. That's a really good question, though. That's like a question I would ask a master's level class that was talking about Muslim-Christian relations at about a 600 level. So that's a really good question. And I would have had a good conversation with those students about that. Or hopefully so. They may have just stared at their phones. Anyway, but the Crusades themselves are going to cause yet a further rift between the East and the West. Because when the First Crusade is successful and retakes all of this territory that they call the Crusader states, they don't give it back to Alexios. And right away, he's like, dude, you all swore all of these oaths. And they tried to, they being the Western European Christians that had taken land in the Levantine region, they attempted to explain this by faulting Alexios. They said, well, when we were fighting at these battles, you didn't send help. And his response is, basically, you sent me a letter and said, we need help right now. I can't produce an army out of thin air. I was gathering stuff to try to help you. You're the idiots that didn't follow the right game plan in the first place. You're the ones that ran behind enemy lines. Blah, 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 blah. And see, that's another thing, Noger. Like, I don't even know if my oath to you matters because you are not even the right kind of Christian. So do any of these oaths matter? And you can just start seeing kind of like how that's knocking over all of these little individual dominoes, but it's just driving this division deeper. And the next Byzantine emperor actually takes it one step further. If I could get my mouse to work. And I get to put the adventure hat back on. Noger, you may have seen this picture, or well, I guess it's not a picture. I guess it's a mural. So we'll give some more adventure hats, and I'll put the adventure hat back on, and then we'll go look at this. So this is a mosaic that is on the wall of Hagia Sophia. It's up on the second floor. If you go in the front door, this is in the top floor around the far side. And we're looking at a few people. So this guy right here is the Byzantine Emperor John II, also from the Komnenos family. We see here, of course, Virgin Mary holding the I'm an adult, just smaller, typical baby Jesus. And this is the empress at the time, whose name was Irene. Actually a very powerful empress for her time, and was central to a lot of John's policies, because John fought a lot and was frequently away, and she was very frequently kind of in charge of a lot of the stuff. But anyway, this is on the wall of Constantinople, and the reason he gets put on the wall here, you can see this big bag of money, because he renovated Hagia Sophia because he had a whole ton of basically war loot, because this dude fought pretty much his entire reign. He was on the throne from 1118 to 1143, so he had a really long reign, and he fought a lot of people. one of the people that he ended up fighting was one of the Crusader states. One of the Crusader states was called Armenian Cilicia, and John literally wrecked the entire state and captured the royalty of the state and held them hostage. So we've gone now from Alexios not wanting to let the Crusaders in, the Crusaders breaking their oaths and not giving the land back, to John saying, we'll just go take the land back. And we're literally having battles between Christian and Christian here, and this just shows you how far things have devolved. Alexios, set reminder to build army, right? That's a good one. Oaths are only valid if there's mutual gain, otherwise people are like, nah. That's a fair thing to point out as well. And nobody really saw the benefit of this stuff. Everybody was sort of super skeptical and not really trusting anybody, and it was all real sketch. But anyway, John is also going to start taking some really weird steps. There are some problems with a particular group of French people called Normans. And I know for a fact that next week on Thursday, we are going to talk about the Normans specifically because they don't get a lot of love and they had massive international impact. The Normans were more than just the Battle of Hastings in 1066. They were all over Europe. They were in the Mediterranean. They were in Asia. They were in Africa. They were all over the place. And this is a bit biased, but it's my show. I get to do whatever I want. I have Norman ancestry, which is one of the reasons why I'm super pale. I'm very tall, and I have a bad temper, perhaps. So Normans all over the place. I actually have an uncle, Norman. Anyway. But the Normans were becoming a problem. These are French people. John the Second really doesn't care for French people at all. So he does something kind of weird here, and he makes an alliance with the Holy Roman Emperor in Germany. And that's very odd, because traditionally speaking, the Holy Roman Emperor and the Emperor in Constantinople have not liked the fact that they both have the title Emperor. They both sort of thought there should only be one emperor, because emperor is as high as you can go, and if I'm the head of the Christian church, as political world, I should be emperor. But then we've got an emperor in the east and an emperor in the west. But then basically here they team up because they don't like the French. So if you have an issue with the French, you can kind of understand the enemy of my enemy thing, right? Well, John ends up causing a lot of stir along the eastern borders of Europe with countries like Hungary. He goes to war with Hungary and beats the mess out of them. There's fighting in Bulgaria. He's all over the place. And while he's doing all of this stuff, what's really interesting is that the relationship between the Eastern and Western churches is kind of at a loss as to how to handle this guy. Because he's big enough and powerful enough that he's sort of extra ecumenical power here. Like if the Patriarch of Constantinople wanted to tell him, stop fighting, they don't really know if they could get him to calm down. Even this whole Christian killing Christian thing that happens when he sacks Armenian Cilicia doesn't really get a lot of pushback from the Patriarch. Now, of course, the Pope in Rome has a lot to say about it because Christians shouldn't kill Christians, and it's beneficial for me to say all of this stuff, Was John a fair strategist to do that so long and so successfully, or was his power base just that overwhelming? Initially, strategy, but as his position developed, then power base. So the Byzantines were not in a good spot when he really took over. The reign of Alexios had seen the Byzantine world kind of lose a lot of hope. Now, politically speaking and economically speaking, Alexios managed to rebuild a substantial base of economic power and put the country back on a rebuilding sort of pathway and did take some land back. But overall, it's really hard for me as an individual to look at the reign of Alexios and go, oh, that guy was super successful. I mean, he was competent, he was intelligent, he knew what he was doing, but the deck was stacked against him. And you can play the best hand in the world, but it doesn't mean you're going to come out net positive, right? John, on the other hand, was like, he was ready to go. Dude was packed and ready and fought and won and was wily and the right kind of conniving and smart, just really quick to make decisions, and had a good gut instinct. Didn't like to dilly-dally around on decisions kind of stuff. So the Empress keeping things working at home deserves a lot of credit. Yes, absolutely. Irene was a big part of his success. Having a stable hand to keep all of the Byzantine politics, to use a little bit of a pun there, at bay was big and helped a lot. Should have done the Highlander thing. There can be only one. John would have beaten the German. I suspect. I suspect. Yeah, I think I would give it to John. Anyway, the real big sort of final blow, though, between Eastern and Western, I guess, halves, is when we get to the Fourth Crusade. Now, I don't want to go all the way into the Fourth Crusade because I suspect that eventually we're going to have a viewer request for the Fourth Crusade. It seems like we're going through them. We've done the First Crusade. We've done the Second Crusade. The next viewer request is the Third Crusade. I suspect we'll get to the fourth one. So I don't want to go all the way through it. Suffice to say, it was a big old mess. And long story short, the Crusade never actually gets to fight Muslims. Instead, what they do is sack Constantinople. So this is Western European Christians that end up sacking Constantinople under the authority of the Pope. Things have digressed a bit from where they used to be, right? We've had a significant tangent of relationships between the East and the West. And we can actually still see quite a bit of evidence of the sack of Constantinople if you go to Venice. So I'm going to throw some adventure hats in the chat, and I'm going to show you some pictures from Venice. Like this. So this is a very famous base of a column. This is referred to as the periphery column, or porphyry column, sorry. And we see on this side and on the other two sides the four emperors of the Tetrarchy. So this is back when Diocletian was trying to save the entire Roman Empire back in the late 200s and establish the Tetrarchy in Constantinople. They built this big pillar to honor him. So why is this in Venice? Well, guess why? Because the ships that the Fourth Crusade used were from Venice, and the Venetians stole lots of stuff from Constantinople. Another thing that they stole were these horses. This is outside of St. Marco's Plaza in Venice, outside St. Mark's Basilica. These horses were built, well, this is actually replicas. I've got a picture of the real ones here. They're inside. You can't take pictures of them inside because you're not supposed to take pictures inside St. Mark's. And to get to the point where you see these, you actually have to pay money to get into the treasury, and they have people walking around like hawks to keep you from actually being able to sneak pictures. If you want to see pictures from the inside of St. Mark's, I do have plenty of those, just not from the treasury vault. But anyway, these are golden horses that were built by Constantine, and they were placed as sort of, I guess, what we might call consecrating statues for the Hippodrome in Constantinople, and now they're in Venice. You know why? Because the Venetians stole everything in Constantinople. Did England learn this from the Venetians? Maybe, maybe, but the Fourth Crusade goes horribly awry. All of the cool stuff in Constantinople, well, not all of the cool stuff, but a huge amount of cool stuff from Constantinople gets looted, including churches. The Crusaders get into Byzantine churches and do stuff like they're stealing out of the Church of Holy Apostles, which had, at the time, relics from, ostensibly, the disciples of Jesus. And they steal these and they take them back to Europe. And all of this is done, again, under sort of the oversight of the Pope, because the Pope was the one that sort of gave the okay to go on the crusade in the first place and had bent the rules to kind of allow for the crusade to kill Christians, because they're the other kind of Christians, right? It's a big old mess. The Byzantine Empire at this point effectively stops existing for about 40 years or so. And we end up with this. We have the Duchy of Epirus, and I'm sorry that this is all in what I guess might be French. But we get Epirus, we get the Latin Empire. They're sort of like reinforcing the idea here. We're following the West. Latin Empire, right? Because the Church of the West speaks Latin instead of Greek. We've got the Kingdom of Thessalonica. We got the Duchy of Athens, the Principality of Achaia, and the Imperia, or the Empire of Nicaea. Now, this is kind of a mess, because all of this used to be the Byzantine Empire. Where'd the Byzantine Empire go? It's not really there anymore. Now, the ruling family still exists, and they don't kill all of them, but they're not in charge anymore. It takes them a while to weasel their way back into control. But think about how far we've come here, right? When we started talking about this in the beginning of the lesson, or the discussion, we were, in one church. We might have had our differences, but we were still, talking with each other. And by the end of this, we have countries in the West going to literally destroy, loot, and overthrow kingdoms in the East. Things have gone downhill, right? This is in 1204, by the way. What's up, Graythar? Good to see you. So it's a mess. It's really, really messy. But that's not really all that's going on. There's a lot of other stuff going on sort of in the background. And a lot of this stuff doesn't get covered enough because a lot of people don't talk about the Renaissance the right way. And we're moving towards the Renaissance. We're not going to do any of that tonight. But we're going to do what's called, like, what I like to call the pre-Renaissance. What's up, Allie? Good to see you. So, the Renaissance didn't come out of nowhere. Where did the Renaissance come from? Well, in the high medieval world, we have a word called scholasticism. This is where the Renaissance came from. What is scholasticism? Well, it's a movement back towards scholarly thought. And you go, what do you mean towards scholarly thought? Well, here's the thing about what happened when Rome fell. When Rome fell in 476 in the West, and the barbarian tribes took over, the leadership of those barbarian tribes that went on to found the countries that are countries like Spain and France and Germany, they did not know stuff. And I know that seems kind of like a vague statement, but there was no tradition of scholarly study in the Franks. They were semi-nomadic barbarians. They didn't have organized scholarship. They didn't have historical writings. They didn't even have a written language of their own at that point, right? Among the Goths or the Burgundians or any of the other kingdoms, you don't have established scholarship as a tradition. They just didn't know stuff. They didn't have mathematics. They didn't study history or language. They really didn't study a lot of stuff like poetry or literature. Now, this doesn't mean that nothing came from this period of time. But we can look at just look at medieval art, right? And I know that I'm kind of a weird art history guy, but if you look at the art of the Roman Empire and the statuary that was made in the Roman Empire, and then look at statuary that was made 200 years later by, I don't know, the Visigoths in Spain, it's not even close. The art of the Visigoths has lost things like perspective. It's lost things like proportion. They didn't understand things like when they're doing painting, they didn't understand things like shading. They didn't understand light source. And this isn't because they didn't have skilled artisans. It's just because they had never been taught this stuff before, right? They're sort of starting from scratch, right? That sounds a bit like a dark age in learning. It is like a dark age. Now, I don't actually like to use the phrase dark age because there was really cool stuff going on. And there were really smart people that were getting things done in really, really interesting ways. I'm not trying to demean the Western European barbarian countries. I'm just trying to say that they lost a lot of skill and they lost a lot of scholarship. And for example, they just lost a lot of texts. If you were to go to a big library in somewhere like Paris in the 900s, you probably weren't going to find things that we take for granted today. You probably weren't going to find Homer or Aristotle. You probably weren't going to find Plato or Socrates because they didn't have copies of those. First off, they didn't know how to find them, to copy them. And second off, the number of people that could read during this period of time was dramatically lower than previous times. They had to learn it on their own, right? They were trying to come up with this stuff by themselves, and that's tough. But here's what happens. It's not the scripture, just burn it. That's a fair thing that happened a lot, Uncle Bill. They just didn't know what stuff was. They didn't have people that could read it very well. They didn't like the fact that it was, not really theirs. So they were just like, who cares? There's no telling how much stuff that we have lost. There's an entire field of linguistics and textual criticism that has been for probably the last 40 or 50 years trying to work backwards to reconstruct texts that we as historians lost after the fall of Rome or after things like the collapse of the Greek and Balkan Peninsula to Ottoman invasion. So they're trying to find stuff like really old manuscripts. One of the things that they're doing now that's really, really fascinating, and I've shared several links about this in the Discord, they can find parchment that has been reused because they can now look with specific types of light diffraction to see where parchment had ink on it because the ink that they used left particular types of mineral and chemical deposits on the parchment. Even if you washed the ink away, you can see where the ink used to be. So they're reading the text that used to be on the parchment, and they're finding more stuff that has been lost through history, and they're trying to recompile all of these ancient documents that we don't have copies of. It's fascinating work, but it's also incredibly painstaking, and it's like ridiculously slow. But recovering lost stuff is a big deal for modern historians. Imagine if you had to figure all that stuff out on your own. It would just take forever. But here's what happens. You remember a story about that a few months ago, an old parchment that had been erased and written over? Yeah, they're starting to do more stuff of this. And this happens a lot with literature. So like some of the Greek plays. This happens a lot with philosophy, stuff like the old writers that might have, written a few things, but they didn't get copied very much. This happens a lot with stuff like kind of mundane articles as well. Things like chronicles of years, right? You just have a document and it's just like on this year this thing happened, on this next year this thing happened. And the average person would look at that and go, who gives a crap about what happened 50 years ago? And they would just erase it. But we find that and we go, holy crap, look at all this stuff with dates on it. You know, we kind of freak out because anything that has an ancient date on it is like filling in puzzle pieces. And we're just, you know, giddy for that kind of stuff. There are still philosophical texts that are buried in libraries that we don't have access to because of politics. Absolutely. Palimpsests for the win. What's up, Maddie? Exactly. Gotta love those palimpsests, right? Anyway, so here's what happens. When these Europeans from the West pack up and they go to Constantinople, or they go to Jerusalem, or they see Antioch, or they see any of the other big cities in the old world. And here the old world means like, you know, this side of the Mediterranean that I pretty much have right here. They go, holy crap. Imagine being a crusader from France, like maybe northern France, right? And the biggest building that you've ever seen is your local church. And your local church, you know, might be enough to fit like 1,000 people in, which is a pretty big church, right? And then you go to Constantinople and you see Hagia Sophia, which again is the largest building on earth at the time. And it just blows you away. You're like, holy crap, who built this? And the people in Constantinople are like, dude, that building's 1,000 years old. No, it's not 1,000. At that point, it's 500 years old. It's like, that building's 500 years old. Who cares? Like, we see this all day long. And these people are just like, wait, what? They see these bridges and these big arches and these domes. And they go, we can't do domes. Like, when's the last time somebody in Europe built a domed building? Rome. It's been hundreds of years since somebody in Western Europe knew how to build a dome. And they just kind of get freaked out. They're like, man, we suck. We're stupid. This is amazing. And the Byzantines hadn't stopped building this kind of stuff, right? So there are churches that were contemporary to the Crusaders coming over. And they're like, when did you all build that? And they're like, oh, dude, we just got through building that. And they're like, how do you do that stuff? We don't even know how this works. We don't get this. Like, how do you do this? I'm like, oh, we can show you, right? Do you want to know? I mean, it's just math. And some of these people are like, wait. You guys study math? And the Byzantines are like, you guys don't study math? Because there's no scholasticism, right? But this is what sort of kickstarts it. People that go to the East, especially during the time that the Crusader states are set up. While the Crusader states are set up, there is a ton of pilgrimage. People from the West going to these places that had not been open to Christianity at that point for 500 years, right? They flood Jerusalem and Antioch, and they go to these pilgrimage sites, and, you know, they build these they go see these enormous churches, like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem that was built during the reign of Constantine. They see these amazing things, and they're like, oh, dude, this is friggin' amazing. We want stuff like this at home. And they go home and they tell everybody these great stories, and nobody knows how to do it. So they start bringing stuff back. They start bringing tutors. They start bringing documents that they can copy. They start learning things, and then they go back and they're sort of retransplanting scholarly activity into the West. And this is going to shift a ton of stuff. You start seeing a lot of stuff being written down in vernacular language, which has huge impacts on people, right? If you can't read Greek or Latin because all you speak is German or Anglo-Saxon or French, you have no use with a Bible written in Latin. You have no use for any document written in Greek because it just doesn't matter. But if I'm writing in your language, this has massive impact. And a lot of this stuff that's being written down in this part, the literature explosion that happens during this period of time is mostly being done in vernacular language. Now, you do still see people writing stuff in Latin or Greek, for sure. that hasn't gone. It's actually a sign, a bit of a brag, right? Like if you can write an entire treatise in Greek or in Latin, this is sort of like flexing your academic muscles here. But you start seeing things like Beowulf, right? Beowulf comes from this time period. It's a product of scholasticism. Some monk somewhere decided, I'm going to write down this really cool poem from the Anglo-Saxons, and I'm going to write it in their language because that's how it's going to be transmitted to me. The Nibelungenlied, the big ring cycle that's sort of historically important for the German people, gets written during this period of time. So these big epic poetry works that are historical, that sort of create this concept of historical identity. The idea of thinking historically starts happening. We actually get one of the earliest references to King Arthur during this period of time in England. This guy named Geoffrey of Monmouth writes this history of British kings, and in there we get one of the very earliest references to King Arthur. Now, it's obvious here that it's not good scholarship, because what's happening in a lot of these places is people that learn how to read go, I need to write everything down, right? So they go talk to people, and they're collecting not just actual history, but they're also collecting legend, right? King Arthur probably wasn't a real person. But we have these histories, and we have this stuff, but we also have learning. Let me catch up with chat. I feel like I'm way behind in chat. Is it? Oh, hey, Vern. Vern. What's up, man? It's good to see you. Isn't that where we get the holy hand grenade from? Yes, the holy hand grenade comes from Antioch. And it's one of the sacred relics that Brother Maynard carries. And that makes its way all the way to England to be used against the Black Beast. What's up? What's up, Vern? Good to see you, man. Makes you wonder what's hidden under the Vatican. I mean, a lot of stuff. It's probably one of the biggest private collections of knowledge on Earth, and getting into it is ridiculously hard, and you can't publish everything that you see in there. There's probably a lot of mystique that would end up being mostly mundane, except for the really big history nerds. I don't think that we would get into the Vatican archives and find like ancient aliens, or I don't think we would get into the Vatican archives and find the bloodline of Jesus through Mary Magdalene or something like that. I don't think that there are the big conspiracy theories being hidden in the Vatican. I think it would be way more stuff like records of that Pope that actually was having sex with his mistress on the side while he was Pope, which is kind of mundane to the rest of the world, but historians would be like, ha, I knew it. I think that would be a lot of what's in the Vatican, like sealed archives that nobody can get to. What's up, Alistair? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Isn't this how the West gets coffee? I don't know for certain. I don't think so, though. So, answer, I don't know. Gut guess, I don't think so. I think that's a little bit later, because I don't even know at that point if the Muslims were drinking coffee yet. But I don't know the timeline well enough there. I probably should, as much as I like coffee. Camelot, exactly. T. Lawrence got his undergraduate in archaeology by going to the ME, touring around and proving later that it heavily influenced later architecture. There you go, right? Writing becomes a thing, exactly. You're having tech issues, so you're lagging. That's fine. You bet there's a lot of Templar Knights gold. Probably not. I would suspect that if the papacy claimed any gold from the Templars, it probably got melted down and turned into money that got spent a long time ago. Politicians behave badly? Yeah, right. I don't think that we'll find the chronovisor there. I don't think that we're going to find the Fountain of Youth. I don't think that we're going to find the apple that Altair secured from the Templars in Assassin's Creed 1. I don't think that we're going to find, the any sort of that big fancy stuff. I don't think that the Spear of Longinus is there. You just want Excalibur. Excalibur probably didn't exist, Noel. I know that's probably not everybody's favorite thing, but I don't think Excalibur existed. I also don't think Arthur existed. At least not in a recognizable version. I know. I'm just the guy that bases things on fact. Shun the unbeliever. Fine. Let's look at a church. Now, one of the things that happens when you learn math is that you can start building cool stuff. You can start building tall stuff. Like this. What's up, Magnificent? You found all that stuff already and it's in your basement, right? This is the Church of Saint Denis, and this is in Paris. And Saint Denis is widely considered to be the first church and perhaps even the first building, though there's some debate about that architecturally wise, that's built in the Gothic style. Now, to be clear, we call it Gothic. The title Gothic actually came from the late Renaissance, from an Italian guy who misattributed the buildings to the actual Goths. At the time, some people called it Saracen architecture because it was roughly reminiscent of some of the Arabic construction. But it's just a new style. This is a new architectural style. But this is Gothic design. And this becomes standard for a lot of churches. But this is something that comes out of this scholastic movement. And this is something that's very frequently attributed to the Renaissance that should not be attributed to the Renaissance. What's up, Cliff? Good to see you. A lot of people will say, oh yes, Renaissance is when we get Gothic architecture. No, this is 200 years before the Renaissance. But we start seeing big things here, like these rosette windows, which become sort of standard. These big, tall windows with arches. This is sort of standard. These really, really tall walls with very flat front-facing facades. This is hallmarks of Gothic architecture. But this actually takes a lot of mathematical knowledge, because to make a wall this tall with windows in it requires a lot of maneuvering to distribute weight. This is why the arches are so important, because this distributes the weight of all of this material down into the side of the window so that the window doesn't get crushed. Also here, it allows you to make these big doors. And if we were to look down the side of it, we would see a whole bunch of buttresses. Ooh, actually, I have a great idea. I bet we can look at the Church of Saint Denis on our Google Earth. Yes, we can. Let's go take a look. And we could talk a little bit. Yeah, well, maybe not flying buttresses quite yet. Flying buttresses do come around by the time we get to Notre Dame, which is another Gothic style. Let's go Google Earth full screen, and we'll zoom in and see if we can walk around. Ooh, well, I guess we can just look at it from the north. Well, they do have some flying buttresses here. Yeah, we go. These are off the back. But can we see it? That's going to be from inside, isn't it? Can we see them outside? Yeah, you can see them. Here we go. So to build a really, really tall wall like this, you have to have supports to hold them up. And, oop, that doesn't zoom in by scrolling. So you have to build, oop, I just went inside. Oops. This is fascinating stuff, though. We could see more hallmarks of Gothic architecture, like our big barrel vault ceilings here. our use of lots of big open spaces and pointed arches and big windows. Down here, you see the narthex, which is where the stuff crosses. Our church here is actually cruciform. So you have the long actual entryway of the church, and then you have side chapels, and you have the altar up here, right? Yeah, this is the apse. It's the little rounded part up at the top here, the apse. But this is Gothic architecture, right? And this is stuff that happens from this period of time, the high medieval world, right? You got to love those big windows, right? Using Google Earth just to stare at goth buttresses. Sure, why not, right? I quite like this style of architecture as well. Saint-Denis is on my church bucket list. I've been to Paris, but I've never been able to make it to Saint-Denis. It is a remarkable church, and what's really interesting about it, other than it being a big church, is that it's also the site of a ton of royal tombs. There are dozens of royal tombs all over Saint-Denis. This is going all the way back to people like the Merovingians and all the way through like Louis the 14th, I believe, is there. So, have you been to Italy? Yes. Have I gone to churches there? Lots. Do I have pictures? Absolutely. So many pictures. I've been to a lot of churches in Italy. Including a few that were on my bucket list. I got a couple off of my church bucket list last time I went to Italy. We went to Ravenna. Oh, Ravenna, my heart. Whew. I have been to Siena. Yeah, there's great churches in Siena. Great churches in Siena. I've been to Il Duomo. That's in Florence. Yep, I've been there twice. The Gothic style is everywhere in Western culture. We associate it with holy, ancient, strong, mysterious wealth. Yes, and New York City does have a Gothic cathedral. This does get transplanted. There are sort of like offshoots, because there's like English Gothic, which is sort of like an English take on it. Then there's American Gothic, which of course is a painting with the farmer and his wife, which is a bit of a joke. But the Gothic style becomes super popular all over. But it also has a lot of theological implications. I don't really have a whole bunch of time to go into church stuff. I could do an entire lecture, an entire stream on church architecture and the purpose of all of this stuff. Somehow I associate the Gothic style with unfinished. That might be because a lot of the internals are fairly Spartan. You do have a lot of flat space. Not every Gothic church has an overabundance of adornment. Now, some of them are way out there, right? Way out there. Santa Maria Maggiore in Siena is like blown up with decoration. It's like top to bottom, head to toe covered in stuff. I will go cry. I want to go. Allie, if you want, I can share pictures with you. Ping me in Discord and I'll send you some photos. I think there was only one big Gothic church finished before the 20th century. Well, I mean, Saint-Denis was finished. Because I think they finished that one in like before 1100. And then I think my brain is saying 1143 for Notre Dame, and I don't know if that's. Now I'm going to have to look it up. I don't know if that means that it was started in 1143 or if it was finished in 1143. No, I don't want Notre Dame football. Oh, really? 1163. It wasn't 1143. It was 1163 is when they laid the cornerstone of Notre Dame, and it was finished in 1345. But it is finished. They finished it in 1345. Or at least they did everything that they wanted to do. Now, of course, they're currently renovating it after the big fire. I think it's back open now. No. I'm actually looking here on the Wikipedia. December 8th, 2024, expected reopening of Notre Dame. So there we go. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the high medieval world. As an overview, what's happening here? Well, the East and the West had a big falling out, and it's only getting worse. The East was way ahead with things like technological, artistic, and historical and literary sides, but the West is now going to start catching up. And the scholasticism movement is going to start the West on the road that will end up with the Renaissance, which we'll talk about next time around. Not next stream, but like next time we loop back around the Earth and end up back at Europe. We'll talk about the Renaissance in the next phase, if you will. So that's what's up with that. The world is changing, though, and it's getting to look a little bit more like today. But that is pretty much all that I wanted to say about the period of time. But of course, if anybody has any questions or wants to do point redemptions or anything like that, now is the time, and you are welcome to do so. Otherwise, I think we'll just kind of hang out for just a little bit while I look for somebody maybe to raid. I don't like the Dark Ages. I know that some people like using the word Dark Ages. It's not really something that I like to use, though. All right, let's go do Tradle. Tradle. Guess which country? 1.98 million. Good, great. Do we have? This is going to be another one of those weird little islands in the middle of nowhere, isn't it? I already feel this. Sowing seeds. Their number one export is seeds. They export less than 2 million. That's like somebody's really excited aunt on Etsy, right? Oh my gosh, this is such a small little country. I almost guarantee you that this is a little island somewhere. Rough wood. $285,000 a year in rough wood. $440,000 a year in seeds. Okay, so what's some tropical island? But like 1.98 million is so small that it's not even like a small island. Like the one that we did last time was like 1 billion or something like that, and it was a tiny little island. This is like a tiny little island. Oh my gosh. Dude, I don't know. What's a tiny little tropical island? I mean, we could guess Tahiti. Okay, I guess we can't guess Tahiti because that's not going to work. I don't know why we can't guess Tahiti. It's a territory. What about Tonga? Can we guess Tonga? Hey, we're going to guess Tonga. Yeah, this is another one of those little weird islands in the middle of nowhere. That's out in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific. What's 1,900 kilometers? Oh my gosh. That's like 5 cars, right? No, it can't be American Samoa. It's too small for American Samoa. Yeah, it's even smaller than the last one, right? Oh my goodness. The 1.88% valves should be a giveaway, right? 7% motor vehicles is like 5 cars. San Marino, see, this is too small for even San Marino. No, we don't get any other clues, Vern. It can't be the Faroe Islands because that would be a different direction and it would be way further away. So we're in the South Pacific. And that's basically the Galapagos. So from Tonga, the Galapagos would be the opposite direction. So we need to go south and west of Tonga. Good gosh, I don't even know what is south and west of Tonga. Oh, good gravy. Maybe New Caledonia. No, New Caledonia is too big. This isn't going to be it because it's too big. Which is, oh, we're closer. Hey, we're closer. What's directly south of New Caledonia? New Zealand. There's nothing. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, the only thing south of Caledonia is New Zealand. That's it. That's it. We're going to cheat. All right. We are officially cheating. Burnt pine? What is burnt pine? We are officially cheating, ladies and gentlemen. St. Helena is where they sent where they sent Napoleon. Okay, so here's New Caledonia, which it's not because this is too big. All right, and we're going to go south of here. Hey, look. It's Pacific. Okay, what is this? What is burnt pine? Burnt pine in Kingston. Norfolk Island? What is... I've never even heard of Norfolk Island. No, Papua New Guinea would be way bigger than this. It'd also be in the opposite direction. I've never heard of Norfolk Island in my life. What is this? It's got an international airport. Holy moly. International meaning that it flies to New Zealand. Yeah, let's try Norfolk Island. Hey, look, it might actually be it. Norfolk Island. I don't even know what this thing is. I don't know. Oh, we can't see because I didn't switch back over to this. But yes, it is Norfolk Island. Whee! Okay, so yeah. Pro cheat, yeah. Oh, I mean, it had to be one. It's so we got 936 kilometers south of Caledonia. So it's basically just like we're gonna scroll down until we find it. Burnt pine because there's a pine tree on the flag. Yeah, but I didn't know. Is that why somebody tried to was burnt pine a hint? If so, Nixlotl, I completely lost it. I completely missed it. So their chief export is seeds. 22% of their export is seeds. Scrap iron. This is when Jimmy wrecks 2 of the 3 cars. Or what washes up on the beach. Or shipwrecks that they salvage. Right? I'm not hating on I'm not hating on Norfolk Island. I just literally know nothing about it. Can we wiki Norfolk Island? All right. Oh, they don't pronounce the L. It's Norfolk. Because, you know, whatever. External territory of Australia, located in the Pacific Ocean between New Zealand and New Caledonia. So at least I knew the right location-ish. Directly east of Evans Head, together with the neighboring Phillip Island and Nepean Island, the three islands collectively form the territory of Norfolk Island. At the 2021 census, it had 2,188 inhabitants living in a total area of about 14 square miles. Its capital is Kingston. Interesting. It was a penal settlement. Go figure. The second penal settlement. Settlement began in 1856. The descendants of the Tahitians and the HMS Bounty mutineers. So we're back towards Pitcairn Island, right? That one was the first trail that we ever did. Wow. It was accepted in 1913 as part of the agreement. Check it out. Oh, it's under reduced autonomy. Necessary to address issues of sustainability which have arisen from the model of self-government requiring Norfolk Island to deliver local, state, and federal functions since 1979. Okay, so what this is telling me is that the population is aging and they can't take care of themselves anymore. And I bet that a lot of the young people that are born there end up leaving. Do we have demographics? Yes. 16% of the population were 14 years and younger. Yeah, they are massively older. 54%. Yeah, so what is that? 78% of their population is basically adult. They don't have kids and the kids are leaving. Figures show an aging population. Many people aged 20 to 34 having moved away. Yep, called that. Interesting. Okay, well, there we go. All right, Evo, good to see you. Take it easy. So you're saying you might be able to afford a house there? Yeah, I bet. It'd probably be pretty cheap. Major naval base there, right. What happened to the Austronesian inhabitants of the island? I would suspect colonization. Pictures at the bottom are pretty. We can look at. All right, I'm not seeing pictures at the bottom. Maybe I had to click on something. Anyway, that was interesting. I did not know that they existed, so congratulations to Norfolk Island for existing. I appreciate you. It sounds like it would be a cool place to go and get away from things. Because there's not a lot of things there. And, I mean, that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's good to just sort of chill out. What's up, Lopta? Good to see you. We're actually wrapping up here. But we'll do standard question book. Where is the standard question? Oh, there we go. Here we go. Standard question book. You know the drill. We're going to open up a book. We got one from the very front last time, so let's get something from the back this time. How about you? And we're going to just go like doodle-doodle-doodle-doop, and we'll stop right there. And then I'll ask the question. Tell something of the career of George W. Cable. Name 3 of his books. Well, let me tell you. I have no idea who George W. Cable is, nor can I name any of his books. So now we're going to have to go back to Wikipedia, because that's the only way that this is going to work. So W. Cable, he's an American novelist. Look at that guy. Looks like a chipper fellow. George Washington Cable. Now, how about an original name of that? He was an American novelist, notable for the realism of his portrayal of Creole life in native New Orleans. Now, how have I not heard about this guy? He has been called the most important Southern artist working in the late 19th century, as well as the first modern Southern writer. His treatment of racism, mixed-race families, and miscegenation. In his treatment of racism, mixed-race families, and miscegenation, his fiction also has been thought to anticipate that of William Faulkner. Well, look there. He also wrote articles critical of contemporary society due to hostility against him after two 1885 essays encouraging racial equality and opposing Jim Crow. Cable moved with his family to Massachusetts. He lived there for the next 30 years and then moved to Florida. Got run out of the South for liking black people. How surprising. All right, let's look at his list of novels. Wow, he wrote a lot of them. Old Creole Days, The Grandissime, Story of Creole Life. I've heard of none of these. Has anybody heard of this guy? And I'm not trying to say that like, oh wow, if I haven't heard of him, I bet none of you have either. It was more like, does anybody have knowledge of this person? Because I don't. I didn't know if anybody might be like a literary person and might be able to give some additional insight. But there we go. George W. Cable, Southern writer, wrote about mixed race stuff and racism in the South. Cool. I dig it. I might actually, I'll say this like, oh, I should go look up one of his books and read it. The chances of me doing that are pretty slim, but it is interesting. Someone on Wikipedia knew of him. Sure, right? Strange True Stories of Louisiana sounds good, though. There were a lot of those books that came out that are sort of like that in the late 1800s. The history and mystery genres in the late 1800s were really, really big. Really, really big. So, like Penny Dreadfuls, Sherlock Holmes, that kind of stuff. Was really big in the late 1800s as a genre. So, cool. Learned something new. Learned two new things. Where Norfolk Island is and who George W. Cable was. So, you know, it's a learning thing for me too. All right. Anybody else got anything? Anybody got any questions? Other points to redeem? Other statements to make? Because I think we were about to go raid. We're going to try to raid somebody. What's in the news? What do you want to talk about? What's in the news? He did speaking tours with Mark Twain. Oh, that's cool. Your most interesting article. Like the most interesting article that I read today. Okay. I read an article today about my home state. Mississippi, and this is something that Tuna has already seen because I posted on Facebook today. This is the first time I've posted on Facebook like in maybe a year. I don't know. I don't post on Facebook that often. But The Hill had an article today about the average cost of food in the 50 states. And my state, Mississippi, was third highest in the nation. We are the poorest state in the nation, and we only come behind California and Nevada for price for food, which means that every other state, all 47 other states, including Alaska and Hawaii, have cheaper groceries than Mississippi, which is ridiculous. The poorest state of the nation has the third highest rate of groceries. And the biggest reason is we have the highest grocery tax in the nation. There are only about 10 states that have grocery taxes. We have the highest one in the nation. It's 7%. And there might be a reason why we're the poorest state. Maybe unfair taxes that apply to everybody across the board hurt the poorest people the most. Yeah. That's on top of sales tax, Noger. That's on top of sales tax. Yup. Is there anything you don't want to tax as groceries? I agree, Frank. Aloha. We're also at the bottom of most other lists, except for the bad lists, and we're at the top of those. Hey, we're number one at like teen pregnancy and syphilis and stuff like that. So, we do produce a lot of food. We're one of the biggest producers of soybeans and lots of... What does it go to? That money goes to nepotism and greed. Our state is one of the most corrupt states, and we have some of the most pork barrel spending of any state in the nation. And it goes to the buddies of the people that run the state. For example, our current governor, when he was lieutenant governor, okayed an expansion of a highway to get from the Capitol to his house so that he didn't have to sit in traffic as much when he was going home for the weekend or after work. That's what our tax money goes to. Yeah. Corruption. How's Amtrak in Mississippi? The worst. We have some of the rails that start in our state are the most delayed train track routes in the nation. The one between us and Atlanta is the most delayed train route in America. You don't want to talk about your governor? He's absolutely terrible? Well, bless you. I bet ours is worse. And I'm not trying to say that like one-upping you. I'm just trying to say, like, objectively speaking, I bet ours is worse. All right, let's see who's streaming, and let's see if I can find somebody new to go drop in on. Let's maybe look at Knowledge Fellowship and see if anybody's streaming in Knowledge Fellowship that we haven't rated before. Homozygote, but we rated him like last week. Professor Ashley. All right, we're gonna go raid this person. I don't know who this is, but they are a fellow member of the Knowledge Fellowship. They're currently playing a video game called Superliminal. I haven't seen Ram's Reef at all. No, I'm not sure exactly what that is, Uncle Bill. If only we could apply this kind of governorship to the rest of the country. Yeah, exactly. I remember a recent engineer in a video about U.S. that says, the city in Jackson, the city of Jackson had a water crisis similar to the one in Flint, where they had to basically ask for federal aid to get drinking water to the capital city of Jackson. The reason of that is because white people don't live in Jackson anymore. The Jackson city limits are overwhelmingly people of color. The white people have moved out into the surrounding areas and taken all their tax money with them. And the city of Jackson then has the overwhelming burden of running the capital with all of the travel and stuff that's involved and policing all of that stuff. They had to spend a lot of their money on things like, traffic and keeping roads up and things of that nature, so that they don't have enough budget to do things like, fix the pipes. But this is what happens with white flight, right? Raid Roulette. It's a 24/7 stream. Interesting. I don't know if I can do that kind of stuff. Anyway, we're going to go raid Professor Ashley. I've never been over to Professor Ashley's channel before, but that's cool. We're going to say hello. Our battle cry, as always, is adventure. And if you have any of those super cool emotes, you can throw those into the chat. As a note, why am I not clicking buttons the right way? Let me click the button. Did I click the button? Is it actually going to work? Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. As a note, I am going to hopefully try to stream this weekend and do some Gundam stuff, but I'm not certain exactly when. I should make sure that I say thanks to everybody that has supported me on Patreon and supported me by sending me reading material. You can see the commands there if you would like to get more information about either of those. Please do not feel like you need to or that you should. It is just available if you feel, I don't know, super excited. Other than that, we'll be back around next week for regularly scheduled Thursday stream. And yeah, I hope everybody has a pleasant weekend. I hope that tomorrow treats you well. And I will see everybody next time. Take it easy. Have a good one.